exciting, and it's so great to see you all here. I'm Heather Moss, and I'm the Chilliwack North representative. And I'm just looking, I think we have John Les, who was just yelling over there, here, and John Van Doggen is here as well. And, oh, there you are. Hi, nice to see you here. Thanks for coming. And I don't see any other elected people. Bruce Bandman is here. Bruce Bandman's in the house. Yes. There he is. He was schmoozing in the room. So it is my pleasure to be part of this wonderful team and have John Rustad as our fearless leader. He is a man of integrity and ethics, and his experience in politics has made him wise and someone that is very trustworthy. So without further ado, I would like to welcome John Rustad to the stage.
Well, thanks very much, Heather, and it is really a pleasure to be able to be back in Chilliwack. How are you guys doing tonight? Are you guys ready to turn Chilliwack blue? Are you ready to turn British Columbia blue? All right, I tell you, and how we're going to do this, quite frankly, is the hard work we have of our local candidates. Both Heather and Alia are doing great work here in Chilliwack. I want to mention Bruce Bandman, of course, here. Thank you so much for being here, Bruce. And a little story about Bruce just to start off. And see, I don't need to say anything more than that. It's all it has to do. No, I've already enjoyed working with Bruce in the legislature. He's such a good guy to be able to work with. Always manages to make me laugh. And he does such a great job of holding the NDP to account in the legislature that he gets up and they just cringe. It's just great. Anyway, guys, so look, this campaign actually is really, this is about how we want to bring common sense change back to British Columbia. There is just so much going on in this province that's wrong. There's so many issues that, quite frankly, David Eby, all he can do is lie. That's all he does now. He isn't talking about issues. He's not going out there talking about ideas. He's just coming out there and outright lying. Like he's saying, the Conservatives, we're going to cut $4 billion out of health care, and we're going to bring back bridge tolls, and we're going to bring back MSP and all these sort of things. All this is just lies. And I guess for the life of me, I can't quite understand how it is that a premier can be that comfortable with lying in British Columbia. It just boggles my mind. However, it just goes to show the weak leadership in there. But what we want to do, quite frankly, as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, is we want to make sure that we're making life more affordable for people. And so that's why we're going to axe the carbon tax and we're going to get rid of it. And I tell you what, it's not just the carbon tax we're going to get rid of. We're going to get rid of the low carbon fuel emission standards. And between the two of them, that will cut almost 36 cents a litre out of the cost of gasoline, making life more affordable for everyone. But we're not done there. We've got to do so much more. And so one of the things I hear from people all the time is struggling with rent and with their mortgage, trying to buy a house. People are just, struggling to put food on the table. So we need to figure out how we help with that. And that's why we put together what we're calling the Rustad rebate, which is $3,000 a month, up to $3,000 a month for your rent or your mortgage or for that matter, strata dues, which will then give you a tax credit. You'll be able to deduct that off of your taxes, and it's just a way to be able to make sure that the things that are needed in our society can be paid for, and not by government providing a handout, by leaving that money in people's pockets. That'll make a huge difference. It'll be about $1,800 in savings for the average family in British Columbia. And it's, like I say, it's one of those huge things that we need to be able to do for people to help with housing. But we're not going to be done there. We've got more things that we want to be able to announce here in the coming days in terms of what we're doing to be able to help with affordability. We announced our housing platform yesterday, and all of that is about just trying to make sure we unleash the potential of the private sector. We have David Eby and his government believe that everything should be done by big government. He thinks government should have the full role in housing. Matter of fact, he even once said that he doesn't think the private sector has a role in housing. The private sector doesn't have a role in housing. I just look at it and I think, this isn't the Soviet Union, even though you've got a Marxist leader, right? This is what we have in British Columbia. So what we are doing is we want to make sure that we get government out of the way. Instead of it taking 4 to 7 years to build housing, it should be, or 4 to 7 years to get permits to go ahead with the project. We're going to try to get that down to 6 months for permitting and 3 months for the process, so that people can get stuff built quickly. We're also going to make sure that we come to the table with $1 billion for communities across this province to deal with the water and sewer upgrades, the critical things that are needed to be able to do densification. We're going to work with communities to do pre-zoning. I call it pre-zoning. It's just zoning, really, around densification, so that all of that work can be done as far as part of the official community plan, so you don't have to go through all this process. Once again, this is just about making sure that we actually get homes built. In British Columbia today, we've seen a 1/3 reduction in the number of housing starts just in this last year alone. At a time we've got a housing crisis, we need to be doubling housing starts, not seeing a reduction. And so our plan is about doing just that, unleashing the potential of the private sector, making sure that we can get the houses built in this province, and in particular those rental units that need to be built. There was an old program that was done many years ago called the MERV program, the multi-unit residential housing program. And what it essentially did is said that you can write off the capital much faster, and so that you can get to profitability faster within these projects. Most of our rental stock that we have in British Columbia today was built at that time. So we want to bring back a program like that so we can get the rental stock built, so we can make sure that we stabilize prices and hopefully bring down the rents. It's just, you think about housing, it's the number one thing that's on everybody's mind. How do you afford to live in this province? How can you buy a home in this province? So we need to make sure that's a big focus for us as a government. But I want to explain why this is such a big deal. 1 in 3 people in this province are thinking about leaving. 1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving this province. And the reason why is because they can't see how to build a future. Right? If you're struggling to put food on the table and pay your rent, how do you ever dream of holding a home? How do you ever think about even raising a family? And if you can't do that, you're saying, well, why am I staying in British Columbia? And I think, and Bruce talks about this in terms of his grandkids, and I think it's, on every parent's mind, how do we make sure that those people want to stay in this British Columbia, want to build their future here, and make sure they can be proud to be called British Columbians? That is what we need to do as a goal within government. There's one other thing, though, that's driving people out of this province, and that is what we're seeing with crime and with drugs on our streets. It's such a sad situation. So we're going to end decriminalization, we're going to get rid of safe supply, and we're going to make sure, quite frankly, we have a treatment that's needed for people in British Columbia, because it's just the right thing to do. And we've got a government that just thinks keeping people on drugs is the right thing to do. I think, quite frankly, it destroys lives. There's no question in my mind the numbers behind that. So we're going to end that nonsense. We're going to make sure that we have treatment in place so that we can get people healthy and being able to have productive lives. And when it comes to crime, what we're seeing in this province, even though they'll say, oh, the crime numbers have dropped in British Columbia, no, they haven't. It's just they aren't being reported because the police can't do anything, and the people know that. The criminals are becoming emboldened. They're doing more and more crime because there's no consequences. So this needs to change. Where we have these prolific offenders that are out there continually committing these crimes, and the police are telling me it's 20% of the people that are committing 80% of the crimes, there has to be consequences for these actions. So we're going to push not just for bail reform federally, but we're going to push for guaranteed minimum sentencing to get these people off our streets, to make our society much safer, and make sure that there is consequences for these people committing all these crimes here in British Columbia. And there's only so much that we can do provincially because some of these things are federally, but there is one thing that we can do. Where you have these violent, prolific offenders, these people who are committing these crimes and just getting a slap on the wrist and being allowed back out on the streets again, often with weapons offenses, if the criminal system, if the legal system won't put these people away, what we will do is we'll use the Mental Health Act. If somebody's at risk of harming themselves or others, we can hold them and treat them until they're no longer a risk. We need to get these people off our streets. And I can tell you something, there will be a Section 7 challenge, which is a charter rights challenge, saying we're taking away the rights of these individuals by doing this. My perspective is really simple. I want to protect the rights of citizens in this province so that they're safe. And if we have to do this, we will take the notwithstanding clause because we need to get these people off our streets and need to make sure that our society can be safe once again. When it comes to things like healthcare, I can tell you, we need major reform. Our healthcare system is broken. It is just plain and simple. It is broken today. It is in a crisis. We don't have the healthcare professionals that we need. We don't have the facilities we need. We are the second most expensive healthcare model in the OECD nations, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the 30 most developed countries in the world. We're the second most expensive, and yet we are the second worst when it comes to outcomes. And I look at this, so it's the second most expensive and the second worst. What is it that we're protecting? This is crazy. So we need to be looking at how we look at the models that are actually far more successful, these European models. Universal health care, just like we have, but they're delivered by both government and non-government agencies. The funding follows the patient. We got a government today that essentially believes that the system is more important than patient suffering. And I couldn't disagree more with this government. We need to make sure that it is all about the patient and everything that we do. It's not about a system. We have a system today as well that has 10 times as many healthcare administrators as Germany, even though Germany has twice the population of Canada. Close to 40% of our nurses are administrators. And I know, they're trying to do the best they can, but they're snowed under with all this bureaucracy and process. We need to get rid of all this. We need to make sure we have our healthcare workers doing the services they need on the front line. We need to get rid of these mandates and all the restrictions and hire back our healthcare workers because we need everybody we can in this system. And I just want to say this. Bonnie Henry refused to hire back our healthcare workers for years. Even though every other jurisdiction in the world hired back their healthcare workers, Bonnie Henry will not be working for a Conservative government in British Columbia. When it comes to our education system as well, there's big changes we need to have through there. Our education system seems to now be all about teaching kids what to think. And what it needs to do is it needs to be teaching kids how to think. We have to get that big shift. And that's why, whether it is social issues or whether it's environmental issues or political issues, our education system needs that kind of reform that is just focused on actually teaching kids the basics of how to think and how to think critically. That means things like SOGI have to be removed from our schools. We have to make sure that we've got a strong anti-bullying program in place and support in place for kids. We've got to make sure that every kid can be safe and welcome in our schools, but we cannot allow this ideology to just degrade our education system. Today in our education system, the reading, writing, arithmetic, where numbers are all in decline. That's, to me, it means we are failing our kids. We're failing their future. This is what needs to change, and so we'll make sure that we make those changes. It's not going to be easy, but it's, once again, it's the right thing to do, and so these are things that we'll fight for. There's so many things to talk about. Today, for example, we just introduced our agriculture policy in British Columbia. And the thing that is driving this policy is really simple. We only procure 1/3 of the food that we consume from British Columbia. 2/3 of the food that we consume on a daily basis comes from outside our borders. And whether it's changing climate or whether it is changing government policies that are going to reduce food production outside of our borders, I don't want to leave our population vulnerable. I think, quite frankly, we need to do better to be able to look after ourselves in this province. So we have a policy and a plan that put forward that's going to be pushing to double the agriculture production we have in this province, make sure that our food is available, make sure that it's made available locally. We're going to drive down the cost structure. Part of that's getting rid of the carbon tax, of course, but renewing the commitment between government and the ALR and people in the ALR, making sure that there is a real benefit for doing that. Back in the 1970s, everybody that was in the ALR lost their private property rights. In return for that, then the commitment that that land would be used for agricultural purposes, there was a commitment from government to provide a benefit. That benefit has been eroded away today to virtually nothing compared to the loss of your private property rights. So we need to renew that commitment. We want to make sure that land is there and available for agriculture, but as a government, we need to make sure that people are properly compensated for losing those private property rights and providing the food that we need. So this is part of a structural change that we'll do in British Columbia to make sure that we do everything we can to drive down our costs, to make sure that our food can be made available locally, to make sure that things like the Agricultural Land Commission are not going to be in the way in terms of these policies, so that we can provide the food that we need and make sure that it can be made available locally for people to be able to buy in British Columbia. And I want to close with this. Our economy is, quite frankly, is in real shape in British Columbia. Real tough shape, I should say. We've got a $9 billion deficit and counting. I suspect that's going to be somewhere between 10 to 12 billion by the time we get to March. It's phenomenal. It's a record in British Columbia. It is more than 10% of our budget. So about 12 to 14% of our budget is deficit. It is unsustainable. When we talk about wanting to keep our kids here and be able to build a future, it's not just about, having them be able to put food on the table and afford it. We also can't be bankrupting their future. We need to get our economy growing in this province. We need to be able to put the feet underneath our forest sector again to make sure it can be healthy and competitive in British Columbia. We have... Yeah. We've got a significant plan around that to be able to do that. We need to get our mines open in this province. There are 17 mines in British Columbia that are either permitted or about to be permitted. That would represent 20 to 30,000 jobs, a $38 billion investment, and add over $800 billion to British Columbia's GDP. And the best part about it is, if we could get all those mines open in British Columbia, the annual revenue to government from that would be $11 billion a year. It would eliminate our deficit just by opening up those mines. So we're going to get government out of the way. We're going to make sure that there isn't this delay in process, and we're going to get these mines open in British Columbia. There's so much more that needs to be done when we think about this in government, but our sole focus is going to be this. Somebody has asked me, what should the theme be for our bureaucracy? Should we have that honor of forming government? And I said, it's really simple. We're just going to get shit done. We're going to make sure we can open up this province. Because at the end of the day, look, if 1 in 2 youth is thinking about leaving this province, my measure of success of a Conservative government would be really simple. By the end of the 4 years, if we can make the changes that we need to do in this province and we can get our economy going, I want to see it that those youth are not only looking at being able to stay and live here and raise a family here, but other youth are looking at British Columbia again to come here and build a future. British Columbia has all the potential we could ever want. We have all the resources we could ever want. We can grow all the food that we need. We have a well-educated, skilled population, but we're hopelessly managed. We've got to get government out of the way. We've got to unleash our potential. We have to make sure that people can build a future here. And once again, you've got a government that's saying, you can't even call people British Columbians because it might offend somebody. Well, I'm sorry. I'm a proud Canadian and I'm a proud British Columbian. And the job of Conservatives... The job of a Conservative government is to make sure that people can build that future here and be proud to call themselves British Columbians. Be proud to be part of a future that includes everybody, but most importantly, that includes that vision of hope again for people in British Columbia. Let's bring back common sense to this province. Let's make this happen. Thanks, everybody, for coming out here today.
Okay, let's give John another round of applause and thank him for making time to come to Chilliwack today. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Rustad when I was thinking about joining the Conservative movement at the very beginning of the party, before it was a party, before there was 93 candidates all across British Columbia ready to stand up for all of you and what you believe in and what we need to happen in BC. And back then, John and I sat down and had breakfast together, and immediately I could feel the passion, the truth, the love, and the integrity that he has, that he shared with all of you today. And by his word, he's going to accomplish all of the things that he just talked about in record time. And I want to be a part of that, and I hope that all of you want to be a part of that. And we need all the help that we can get here in Chilliwack, Cultus Lake, and Chilliwack North. If you can volunteer, if you can give some money, then we have 22 days to win this election, and we need absolutely all the help that we can get. John said everything that you need to know about the Conservative, the party, and the movement, and he's going to be over here so that you can take a picture with him and share it on your social media. Talk to your friends. Put out a lawn sign. Do everything that you possibly can, because that's what we're doing, and we want to win the election, and we want to turn Chilliwack blue again. Thank you all.